Welcome to Amplifying Leadership, a place where we talk with guests on their leadership journeys and hear about what they think is key to becoming a great leader. My name is Tara Lehman, and I'm a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services. For our leadership clients, we support you through this podcast and various leadership growth services. To learn more about our Amplifying Leadership division and our community, please visit amplifyingleadership.ca. Today, I am welcoming Nicole Devlin, a leadership trainer, business coach, podcast host of From the Enth Power, and speaker. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So my audience, if you've been listening, you know I like to get to know my guests first. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your leadership journey?
Well, thank you so much, Tara. It's funny because the theme of my leadership journey is brokenness. And I'm fascinated with terms like, failure and versus success, brokenness versus being whole. What does it mean to be a leader? And I think when people hear the word leader, they think of people in positions of power. And I look at leadership as something that I feel from the inside out. And the only way that I feel like I could even think about being a leader, which is to me being an example or a servant leader, is to understand that it's something that I feel and it's an attitude I have that makes people either want to listen to me, glean something from me, learn something from me. And so realistically, I'm a regular New York kind of gal. I grew up in a borough. I'm a second generation Irish American and, working class union kind of people. And I had a regular high school education, and I went out into the working world, and then life hit me with a couple of pretty big lumps that set me back. I really wasn't able to progress through my life like my peers. Like they all seemed to go to college, settle in, decide what they wanted to do. And I was all over the place. And then some pretty profoundly, deep and dark things happened that sort of felt like they set me back. Okay. But I'm open about the thing about failure, but they in fact set me up for new things, to learn new things. I started diving into what are my beliefs? What do I feel about energies, power, life, spirituality. And I started to look at holistic means and ways of living my life, everything from eating to working to being to, evolving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where it started. And that was in my mid-20s, just discovering the fact that I was this undiscovered, untapped, regular person. Figure it all out.
Yeah.
Right. And now here I've had a little bit of practice, And so what does that mean? What it means is that, 30 years later, I have confidence. And that doesn't mean I'm in love with myself all the time. It means that I'm in the game. It means that I'm okay to show up for whatever, seemingly good or bad. It means I have a knowledge that not everything is exclusively good or bad. It just is. And if I show up with a decent attitude and understand my own struggles, that I can become the person I want to be. Not better or best, because I'm not on some kind of moral scale of good or bad. But in becoming my best, maybe I can help a couple of people along the way, and that's the experience.
Yeah. And I want to touch point on something you mentioned really at the beginning is leadership is not about, there's a difference between manager and leader, right? Leader is about helping the team. It's about being on the floor. It's about listening and sharing of ideas. Yes, you may have to make the decisions, but you totally are part of the team, right? And I love that you mentioned that at the beginning because it's a key piece. So what were some of the obstacles you had, say, growing into your own business or growing into a leader that you may have had to overcome?
I chuckle as you're asking that.
Yes, I saw that.
There were a few. There were certainly a few. And I'll tell you what they were, oddly enough. Right now in the world, I think we're hyper aware of the idea of suffering human beings, whatever that looks like, mental health, poverty, marginalization, all kinds of things that are not just affecting the way we live in our communities, but they do affect the workplace because if people take themselves into the workplace differently, And I think that like what is almost not so understood is that the darker emotions that prevent people, I think, from being who they want to be, are something that aren't just a part of people who don't have those, low self-esteem, difficulties with emotions, mental health issues. They're all over the place. And they're also in people who are really intelligent. And as a matter of fact, things like perfectionism, overthinking, and anxiety and stress are hyper present in people that I know that are very, very successful or affluent.
Yeah.
And I say that because one of the biggest obstacles that I've had is what my mother used to say, I'm too smart for my own good.
I've heard that before too. Yeah.
I don't necessarily like expressions like that because I even think it sounds a little demeaning.
Demeaning,
yeah.
I
get it now, right? Like I get it now. Oh, you're too smart for your own good. I'm super intelligent, and it's not always a blessing. And either in my business or my personal, emotional, or even spiritual life. Because sometimes when you're too smart, you can't surrender to greater energies. And therefore, your life becomes limited. And anytime my life, whether it's my mind, my body, my health, my emotions, are limited or constricted, I'm not availing myself of these larger energies, which I'm not even talking about divine energies. I'm talking about a larger energy, like being able to connect to another human being.
Right.
So much available to me. And when I'm not hyper desiring of greater connection to others, I'm just not a good leader. So, I've gotten into more trouble from what I know rather than what I don't know. And also, the second thing that I think was the biggest obstacle that I've had to really do a lot of deeper diving into is lack. I thought you just start from where you're at and you work your way up. And then the more money you have, the more successful you are, the more content you are, the more spiritual you're capable of being, because you get to have the vacations and do what you want. And
I think
the more flexibility, right?
That's a very typical thought too. Yeah.
Very. And I know a lot of people, 50s, 60s, edging up to retirement or whatever, and they're really steeped in that limited belief of lack. Like, I'm not worthy. I can't have enough. Constant fear of financial insecurity, despite like lots of digits in the bank account. And I went through that as well. So I really had to do a lot of work around that obstacle of just because that mentality set me back constantly. And in order to progress in my career, in leadership, in just who I wanted to be as a person, I had to start addressing that because it was almost like a weight that just kept pulling me down and pulling me back.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it still goes back to your point of a leader needs to be a leader, like somebody who's part of things, right? Rather than us looking for that, money or promotion or, sometimes those types of people can actually throw somebody else under the bus just to get that next piece. And so everything is tying to that whole servant base, as you mentioned, leadership type thing. So let's talk about with the powers that are within us as leaders. Can you help us understand why our power within us can help us create results as leaders?
I'll go back to a conversation I just had this morning.
Sure.
Girlfriends and we were having breakfast and talking about another one of our friends, not in any malicious or gossipy way, but this person is in trouble, right? And we're like, how do we handle it? Now, within this group of 5 or 6 women, some of them are like, let her go. She'll organically grow, get it, surrender at her own pace. Another one is a bit more bada boom, like, cut to the chase, tell her what up, tell her what for. Other people just sit there silently and don't necessarily say as much, or maybe another one talks to how people helped her when she was maybe in the same place. So you have sort of the experiential version, the more direct and even perceived as possibly hypercritical version, and the laissez-faire version, right? But what's interesting is that as we were having this conversation, there was a little bit of, kind of interesting, what is that between the sort of laissez-faire and more direct person? A little bit of lack of understanding, or I wouldn't do it that way. And to me, when I'm a leader, I'm in myself and I'm in my body and I'm aware of what's happening not just in the headspace, because the headspace
Mm-hmm.
can go all over the place and get me in trouble, making me feel like I got to say something. I know the answer. But to be hyper aware physiologically of the energy in my body, which is my power. It's my power to heal. It's my power to flow. It's my power to be creative. It's beyond the head and the heart. And like, I understand that it's not about what I say to somebody, be it hypercritical or not say in a laissez-faire fashion, but how I say it. So if I'm going to lead people, it's not about say something or don't say something. It's about intuitively knowing from the gut place when to say something. And then I don't need to worry about the how, because I'm clean. I'm clear. I wouldn't say something if I was feeling aggravated about somebody's behavior, but that doesn't mean I should leave them alone, especially when their behavior is disruptive, not just to me, but to them. Right. So the power within me creates results by basically me being me, and then making that choice to share what I'm thinking, share how I'm feeling when it's really clean and useful, because people don't show up for their best selves if they're entirely left alone. And they don't show up for their best selves when they're being hyper criticized.
Yeah,
right.
Very true.
That energy, that power is so important to leadership because it allows. It's extremely loving. It's extremely permissible. It's in fact highly graceful, divine, and humble. And that is what creates connection, not you need to hear what I have to say.
Yes, I agree.
And then that other stuff you learned, like I've learned in training, well, sandwich your criticism in praise, like a sandwich. You praise them and then you criticize them and you praise them. And then people end up reading cue cards like robots. Okay, I need to praise them and then I can criticize them and then I praise them. But it's this head game. You can't play head games with people's emotions, and they don't want to follow people if they don't feel understood.
Yes, and I think it's all about, you mentioned two words that stuck out to me, which was choice and gut, and making sure that you aren't just saying something for the sake of being part of something. It's about making those choices about when you do say it, and using that gut power within, so to speak. So I love those two words that you brought up. When it comes to leadership, and we talk about those powers that you've been talking about that are within us, is there one that you find within your practice is the most underutilized power within us that we should be using more often?
Ooh, what a great question. Underutilized power. I want to say the feminine, but that's not exactly landing on the right thing. But let me start there and maybe I'll talk into where I need to go. The feminine is nurturing, loving, maternal, creative. It allows, it permits, it cares for it, but it also directs and it also guides and it also leads. The masculine is more dutiful, structural, obligatory. It has to, it must, it is the part of the foundation that's the hard cement. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Right. And sometimes I think this power, when I say the feminine, because you hear people in business, right? And it's like, okay, how do we correct some of the problems, not just in leadership, but also in business as a whole? And remember, I'm coaching and working with professional people. So I'm always wondering about what is the missing piece with these people? Why do they get so stuck? I mean, they're smart, they have degrees, they have jobs, they have money, they have success, they've been promoted. But there's, like addictive psychotropic medication is on the rise, and mental health is on the rise, and stress and anxiety is on the rise. And to me, when those things are an ongoing and strong part of my life, I can't possibly feel as successful, no matter how much material stuff I have. And I think a lot of that is about the way we were raised, which is more masculine. And I don't mean men and women. I'm talking about energy. That dutiful, structural, I got to get up, I got to go, a little bit of perfectionism thrown in there, a low self-confidence that is asking me to constantly overwork to prove either that I'm worthy or that I'm smart enough or good enough. And over here on the feminine, there is that sort of allowing, but it's also very, very powerful. And so to get back to your question, the underutilized power is really one of, moving toward balance. Because also that's another misunderstood. It's like, oh, I need more self-care. I need more, let me go do yoga. And again, I love self-care. I love yoga. I have an active self-care program, both spiritual as well as physical, but it's more than that. It's a daily practice, which I believe the power is to learn how to flow yourself, learn how to move towards creativity yourself, learn to let go of how much your head takes up space in your life and creates problems, and move down, move down into your body, recognize the power that is only present when you are present, mind and body. Right. And so that is the thing. I think it's not just the feminine, it is the embodiment of who you are in the present moment. So learning, I would say the underutilized power, learning to be present, learning the pause, learning how to serve with dignity and excellence,
Yeah. And I do like that you bring up the whole balance between the idea of structured life, because we need structure in our life, right? I mean, we need to get to work on time. We need to be on meetings on time or whatever that is, but also bringing in the creative side or that softer side that allows us to build businesses, build great teams, learn and grow. So I really appreciate that you brought up that whole balance piece, because it isn't one-sided. We as leaders, we need to be able to do both. Yes, we need to have structure for our employees. We don't want them just randomly coming and going as they please if that's not what our workplace is. Yeah. But we also need to be able to be creative, to be innovative, and to grow our businesses and even ourselves, right? And using that power within us to create that balance. And you're right, self-care, huge, must happen. We also, we have to not forget about that. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well, because it's very important. As leaders, we can be stressed out, burnt out, and everything else, and bringing in those balances of, reflection or personal self-care and structure. Everything needs to be that. I like that you brought that. And I'm sure you would agree with me. Balance is never perfect. It's something that we always have to reassess and rebalance every day to day, hour to hour. It can change, right? So yes. That was great. That was great.
And I want to add one little caveat of when you say balance, right? Because it is, and sometimes a seesaw. The idea is you're aspiring for it to be a little bit of a seesaw instead of like a massive up and down.
Yeah. So our audience, sorry, I have to explain. Our audience couldn't see you, but she had her hands going like flat across as if on a seesaw, but then she was like really making big movements. It was quite awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, good. But the beautiful thing, I had a conversation yesterday with somebody about the changing workplace. And, people like some places, like I have a friend in San Francisco, they're not being asked to go back to the office until the end of next year is the projection.
Okay.
Right. In New York, most people are back. Some people are still doing a work from home, remote, hybrid thing. Right. But in most cases, we're back at business and the city is crowded with commuters again. But there was a beautiful thing that happened over the past couple of years called disruption. And it happened, in terms of the pandemic, it happened politically, it happened in our personal lives, it happened racially, it happened socially, it happened in
everywhere,
so different ways where we were all torn up and thrown around. Now, the beauty of that disruption is once things are blown up, then they start to land. And we have a whole different perspective as a result of those disruptions that you can choose to see as a bad thing, or you can choose to see as a good thing. But if you're out of balance and you don't even know it, there's nothing better than a good, healthy dose of disruption. I mean, this was kind of chronic and excessive. Let's be real.
Yes.
There's nothing better than a good, healthy dose of disruption. So let's just say you're moving along and moseying along in your career. You think you're a great leader and you get laid off. Like I did in 2005. And you go, how did that happen? I'm smart. I do a good job. I've been promoted. And it happens to the best of us, And that is the thing that moved me into the career that I'm in today, which I would trade for nothing. So people don't understand that imbalance that sometimes feels like you actually are just thrown back into a state of imbalance that's so dark and devastating. But I promise you that on the other side of devastation and darkness is always more light.
Yes. And it's something that we can learn from these disruptions, and you take it and move forward with it, regardless what it is. I mean, COVID's an excellent example, as you said, major, crazy disruption in the last few years. And we all had to deal with it in a different way, right? We all have a new normal, depending on where you live. As you were just mentioning, even some people are still remote working or hybrid. So you're right, disruption can actually be a way forward for a lot of people to come out of a stuck place or just out of the comfort zone, even to try something new. So congratulations on taking your layoff and looking at it differently, because that's extremely important when we had a lot of layoffs, et cetera, in the last few years. Mm-hmm. So I want to touch very briefly on communication when it comes to bringing out that power within our employees in our team. Is there a way that we can help employees bring out their own power within to be more effective as a team?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. I'd have to get up to look for the notes, but it was something like, companies do a lot of talking about like wanting to, they do all these personality tests, speak to your strengths. She goes, but in fact, like they ignore your strengths and they amplify your weaknesses. And I thought, that's an interesting, whenever somebody says something that's kind of like a blanket statement, I always pause and pull back and say, what does that mean? And how much is it true? And how do I actually feel about that? And then I measure that against my own experience, and she's more right than wrong. And I think that it's simply because most people in leadership don't necessarily have the type of communication that can meet people where they're at. They have a standard of communication, and their standard of communication, sometimes the better their standard of communication, the harder they are on people. The less people feel heard, and you can't have no communication skills at all because people need to be listened to and understood. But the business world is also not therapy. It's not your family of origin. It's a different environment. So in the same way, there's a lot of different places in the world where people are struggling with the change in environment and the changing roles. The work world and companies, whether it's, and I don't care if it's large corporations or small businesses, are also struggling with how to handle these things. The post-disruption new normal. So when we're talking about employees and the employer-employee or manager-employee relationship, for me, it's always been about going back to like servant leadership. I would never ask someone to do that I'm managing that I wouldn't do. Secondarily, even the word managing, I had this friend who was one of my best bosses ever. And I was like, oh, yeah, she got this new job. And I was like, you never talk about your boss or whatever. She goes, yeah, he's in the administrative part of things. I run this over here. Every once in a while, he steps in and tries to manage me. And I'm like, yeah, don't manage me.
Yeah.
They don't want to be managed. They like, I believe the all of us can use guidance and leadership.
Absolutely.
Different than being managed. Managed is like, you're in my stuff. You're telling me how to do things your way. And that's where that balance comes in. There is a way to do things in any company, organization. There's structure, there's traditions, there's rules, there's principles guiding a vision, mission, core values. You hire me because you think I fit in there. And if that's the case, then let me fit in, but let me do it in a way that's unique to me so I can express myself, because you didn't just hire me because I fit your core values. You hired me because I'm capable of helping you grow in a different and possibly greater direction. So I think that allowing of employees, when you're hyper criticizing or expecting them to be like you're actually like drawing them into their weakness or into their powerlessness. Yeah. And they're losing the core of who they are as they're starting to forfeit who they are to who they think you think they should be. I think a lot of people do that without realizing it. And every time I sacrifice who I am, and of course this also isn't about like, well, just be yourself and like I am the great I am, and everybody needs to get that, understand that, and bow to it. No, being myself is I understand there's a structure and a group and a team that I'm a part of. Yeah. But I also can be my unique self, and I'm not drawing extra attention to myself. I'm being my most powerful self, I'm helping to build the team by showing up with everything I have. And you're letting me show up like that.
Yes, I think that's great. And it does come back to that whole servant leadership side as well that you mentioned earlier. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. If we were to take everything that you talked about today and we had to make sure everybody in our audience left with something that they could start tomorrow or in the next week as a key takeaway, what would you say that is?
So there's a thought perspective way to answer that question and then an actual tip. So the thought perspective, it really is be yourself. Like I tell you what, I wouldn't trade my experience for anybody or anything. I wouldn't want to be anybody but myself. And then, but that's one of those positive affirmations you see all over the place. We're all putting them up behind me and my
there you go. Yeah.
and they're great for affirmative purposes, but really the biggest tip always has to be an action item. So which means that find time for quiet. Find time to deeply be with yourself, because I don't believe that you can lead others until you have been led and are willing to lead yourself, or until you've spent time with yourself. Because the other part of it is, it really is a lot about acceptance. I don't aspire to be the best version of myself because I want to be wonderful. I'm deeply immersed in this knowledge that there's parts of me that are ugly and dark. And I used to try to get away from them. And instead I sit with them. It's like the look, don't stare.
Yeah.
I spend enough time to understand what I have trouble with.
Yeah. And
then I try to move towards something better, something different, which usually includes trying to help somebody else, trying to be there for somebody else. Despite my greatest thinking, I don't do a very good job of solving my own problems. And, but yet when I engage in conversations with other people and they talk about their stuff and I find myself wanting to give them advice, I'm probably talking to myself. And
wow, that's a good point.
Yeah, I do find that a lot. It's really hysterical. It's like, I think I'm talking to myself right now. What am I want to tell her what to do? But it's so that really is it. Spend time with yourself and, you and I are both coaches. Let's be real. Get a coach for the love of God. Like my Irish grandfather used to say, for the love of God and all things holy,
Coaches are so important. I mean, I have one for life and then one for business. Yep. They're so key to helping us move forward in good, positive ways.
Yep.
I agree.
Very much so. Very, very, very much so. Everybody needs a helping hand. I don't care if you're the rock for your entire family. You're solid. You coach people. You're awesome. You have all your stuff together. Everybody needs somebody else to lean on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for a wonderful conversation. If there's anybody in our audience today who maybe wanted to learn more about you or what it is that you do, how can they get a hold of you online?
Yeah. So specifically what I do is I tend to help mid-career stuck, intelligent people who are professionals move forward in their career purposefully and intentionally. That could mean changing job, changing career, starting a business, or growing a business, because I also do operational stuff. If you want to reach me, my website is my name, Nicole Devlin, NICOLEDEV as in Victor, LIN.com. And my podcast, which is I'm now video podcasting on YouTube. And also I have, obviously, like most of us, our podcasts are on Apple and Spotify as From the Enth Power, as was mentioned earlier.
Awesome.
Thank you for
again.
having me on the show. And thank you for having this conversation. And thank you for doing what you do, because I think podcasting is awesome. I invite, even if I'll say this one thing to your audience, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, do it. Even if you only put out 10 episodes, it's an extremely useful, beneficial, highly communicative, growth exercise for anybody thinking about being creative in that fashion.
And we can share tips, tricks, information, everything else to help everybody grow at the same time. So absolutely agree. Thanks so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Thank you to our listeners too. We hope that you are taking away some tips today from our conversation. Leaders do need to continually grow and develop for themselves and their team. If you want support and development, or perhaps want to join a leadership community, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca, a twin life coaching and business services division. Until next time, please be safe and be an amazing leader or leader to be.